Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Trumais Perek Zayin Halacha Gimel. We're learning today Daf Samaches. We left off on Daf Samaches Amud Aleph Mamish, all the way on top of the Amid in the beginning of the Gemara, and we just came off the Halacha Gimel, the Mishnah that we had on Daf Samach Zayin Amud Beis. The Mishnah is all about Ta'aroives. The Mishnah began with the first case that if a person had two boxes, the Shtei Kupois. First case of the Mishnah was one of them was Truma, one of them was Chulin. You know which one is Truma, which one is Chulin in the first case of the Mishnah. And now you have, aside of the two kupais, you have a sa'a of Truma. That means you have a third pile of Truma. And that sa'a of Truma fell into one of the two boxes, but ve'eno yodua, to which one it fell in. That was the first case of the Mishnah. So the Mishnah says, Harei ani oimer, it's an interesting expression, ani meaning the Torah, the Mishnah is saying that letoich shel truma nafla. And therefore, nothing really changes. The truma was only allowed to be eaten by kohanim. It continues to only be allowed to be eaten by kohanim. The chulin box that was up until now allowed to be eaten even by non-kohanim continues to be mutter to be eaten by anyone, because sha'ani oimer, that the soft truma fell into the truma. That was the din of the Mishnah. Why are we lenient? Why not be machmer? So as we spoke out when we learned the Mishnah, because this is based on a rule that suffik that abanan lukula. Actually, we're going to have in detail part of the beginning of today's daf, the machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Eish Lakish. Why is it only a suffik that abanan? As we'll see when we learn it inside. Now there's going to be, it's a short daf, but a lot will be learned in this daf. First of all, the Gemara will begin by quoting a braisa that will give similar cases. One of the cases that the braisa will bring in the beginning will be, again, you have two boxes, but not acha shel truma va'acha shel chulin, but acha shel truma tohira va'acha shel truma temeya. Then you have the sa'a of truma temeya. It fell into one of these two kupais, same logic. And again, Nach the Braisa says, Ani Oimer, that the Truma Tameya fell into the Truma Tameya, which means everything continues to be the way it was. Nothing changes. The Truma Tohira that up until now was allowed to be eaten, weiter, continues to be mutar, allowed to be eaten for Kohanim, because Sha'ani Oimer, that the soft Truma Tameya fell into the Truma Tameya. Now, I want to share two nekudais that will help us go through the daf. Number one, listen to this case. We really had it above on daf in the mems, but the case is like this. If a biblically prohibited item falls into other items, in the few cases where it's not going to be batal b'roiv, in the case where it's not batal b'roiv, so therefore we say that the mixture is prohibited. What happens if one item falls out of that mixture? We don't know which one. Do we get to say the one that fell in that created the problem, that was the one that fell out, or maybe that was the one that fell out? Right? Some people can word it, now you only have a sfek sveka. When something prohibited fell into something permitted, why are we saying everything is asur? In the cases where we say that, because you have a suffix. Okay, that's one suffix. On top of that, another event happened. One of the mixture fell out. Is the remaining mutter? So the halacha is, if that which fell in was asur midoiraisa, it will continue to be asur. If the isur initially, if it was something that was only asur midrabanan, even when it's not batal beroiv, so the mixture is asur, but if afterwards one goes out, one falls out, then we say, maybe the isur that fell in was the one that fell out, and the remaining remains mutter. This is going to be one klal gadol that we're going to need for today's daf. At the end of today's daf, we're going to bring a braisa that's going to bring four new cases. What's in common in the four new cases is that our Mishnah, even though I just quoted the braisa, don't worry, it's not going to get in the way. Our Mishnah does not bring tum and tara into the equation. Two kupais, acha shel truma, acha shel chulin. Sa shel truma. Shenafla la achas mehem ve'eno yodua. Ani oimer, that the truma fell into the truma. Now, let me add another detail. Aside of this, one of the two boxes is tamei. Sometimes the truma is tamei, sometimes the chulin is tamei. In other words, the truma and tara of the three, there are two kupais, and then there is a sa'a. If the truma and tara are not uniform, if all of them are tamei, so the truma is a non-issue. If all of them are tahar, then again, tahara, there's no issue of truma. The only question is which one is truma, which one is chulin. If in addition to which is chulin, which one is truma, there's an issue of which one is tamei and which one is tahar, we will not apply the rule of the Mishnah. We will not say sha'ani oimer. Actually, we'll say sha'ani oimer only for the tzad of what is truma, what is chulin. But we are not going to say sha'ani oimer for the issue of truma and tara. We'll see. It's going to be fascinating. Like a palgin on dibura, we're going to say. And the end of today's daf will be teaching us the following rule, coming back to the beginning of today's daf, in the case of the Mishnah. Two kupais, achas shel truma va'achas shel chulin. Sa shel truma shenafla la'achas mehen, but ve'ena yadua le'eza mehem nafla. You know why sha'ani yomer that the sa of truma fell into the truma? Not only because it's a sa isur derabanan, not only. Because if the saw of truma would have fallen into the chulin, it would have created a problem that is unresolvable, which is, as we know, meduma is a problem. Can't fix meduma. But if in the other scenario, if in the other possibility, even if there is a new dimension of an issue, if that's a resolvable issue, then we're not so lenient, even by an isur derabanan. It's like a very practical svara. In other words, we have halachically all these different types of, I call them tools. Sha'ani yomer, based on certain chazakas, based on certain svaras. But there's a lot of maneuverability. You can say this, you can say that. Part of why the Chachamim picks a certain path is because their goal is to come to a place where things are resolved. You can argue, what kind of logic is that? It is what it is. No, sometimes we get to say that I'm going to deal with the possibility that I can resolve. To deal with a possibility that's unresolvable, now Hashem does it to all of us. Then we got to deal with that. But if we can avoid it, then we try to avoid it. I'll leave it at that. That's a vague statement, but it's going to be very, very easy and very fascinating. Let's begin. Okay, so Daf Samach Ches Amud Aleph, Daf Soch. The Mishnah's case was, like I mentioned already for the third time, just a chazan. Shtei kupais, achas shel truma va'achas shel chulin. You know which one is which. The one to the right is truma, the one to the left is chulin. You have a sa shel truma. But now, when it fell into the one of the two boxes, you don't know into which one it fell into. So the Mishnah says, you say the truma fell into the truma. Now the Braisa is going to give various cases that will all share the same rule. The first case is Tum and Tara, but it has nothing to do with the end of today's daf, as you'll see. Okay, says the Gemara, now we're quoting a Braisa. Case number one in the Braisa. Achas tameva, achas tohira. Again, you have two boxes. Whatever there's grain, whatever the item is. Okay, one here. Now here, in this case of the Braisa, the two boxes are Truma, not Truma Chulin, Truma. But one is Truma Tohira, and one is Truma Tameya. The saw of Truma that falls into one of the two is also Truma Tameya. That's the case of the Braisa. It's like convenient. We say that which is convenient. So the Ani Yoimer, I love this expression. Again, like we had in the Mishnah. The Mishnah had it with a shin, Sha'ani Yoimer. Here, Ani Yoimer. Okay. In other words, we are lenient again, mamish, like we had in the first case of the Mishnah. Similar. Next case, similar. You begin with two boxes. One of them is already meduma, with all of the consequences, and one is not meduma. We're speaking about everything is tohoira. Meduma, not meduma. Now, you have a soft truma. It falls into one of the two boxes. Now, obviously, the box of chulin, that goes to all of the cases, does not have the ratio of 100 sa, because then it would be a non-issue. The sa, the kupa shel chulin, has less than 100. If the sa of truma fell into the chulin, now you have a new meduma. We don't say that. We are lenient. Ani oimer lemiduma as nafla. Gavaldik. In other words, we are always saying that what happened was something that will have no adverse effect. We are saying that which was permitted will remain permitted. But in all of these cases, you're not creating a new Isser. Not in the case of the Mishnah, not in these cases, everything stays the same. Final case of the Braisa. Achas yesh bo kedei la'alois va'achas ein bo kedei la'alois. You have two kupais. Both of them are chulin. One has 100 sa of chulin. One has 99 sa of chulin. Sa of truma fell into one of the two boxes. Now, guys, obviously, if you don't add some mishap, you can find out where it fell into. If you knew before how much each box had, then measure it now. The Gemara in the Yerushalmi doesn't go into that. Of course, if you can figure that out, we're not talking about that case. Something else happened afterwards. And now, half of each box got lost. You don't know how much got removed from each box. I have to add that. So now we're back to the same issue. So again, even though it's 50-50, you can say it's a 50-50. In all of these cases, we say, you know what happened? An event that did not create any new halacha. Nothing negative happened. Amachaya. The truma fell into the one that had lahalois. Ani oimer lo'oisa sheyesh bo kedei lahalois nafla. We always will say the scenario that creates no adverse effect. That which was already asur, or that which was already truma, remains truma. That which up until this mixture was mutter to non-kohanim, in the case of the Mishnah, remains mutter to non-kohanim. And in all of these cases, Aviv, the simple question is, let's go, it's 50-50. 50-50, why are you leaning on the side of leniency? It's 50-50. And the answer for this is, it's very pashut, is that all of these cases are dealing with an Isur Derabanan, and the big rule is that a suffix, and we're going into a 50-50 doubt, a suffix Derabanan lekula. Simple. Question is, why? Let's go. I just want to focus on the case of our Mishnah, and the same thing with the Braisa. Why is it a suffix Derabanan? And even though we said this when we learned the Mishnah, I'll repeat it by heart, and then we'll go inside. There are two different ways of understanding the suffix. Option number one is because when Truma, Dairaisa, falls into Chulin, if you only have a simple majority of Chulin, which would mean if you have one saw of Truma that falls into 1.1 saw of Chulin, that's called a Roiv. Roiv doesn't even have to mean, according to almost all, double. It's not that one fell into two. You don't even need that, even though there are some opinions that say that. You don't need 100 Midoiraisa, but you need to have double. No, we're going to go simple Roiv. 1.0001. That's also called a Roiv. Since Midoiraisa, even if the Truma fell into the Chulin, what's the case of the Mishnah? Maybe it fell into the Chulin. Okay, even if that happened, Midoiraisa, there is no adverse effect anyway. Why? Because it's Batal B'Roiv. Why do we have to have the ratio of 100 to 1, which we don't have here? That's only a Derabanan. That's the way we're going to learn that will be one approach. That's why it's a suffix midarabanan. So since it's to begin with a suffix midarabanan, even if there would be a problem, it would be only a rabbinic problem. We get to say it didn't happen. The other thing happened. It fell into the truma. That's one approach. The other approach is, no, not because it's batal b'roiv. Not because of that. Because truma itself is only truma derabanan. Truma's derabanan. Whenever we learned this, just one more time now, just a chazer, there are two ways of understanding that. Either we are referring to after the Churban Bayisheni, and even though Kedusha Shniya Kitchela Shaita, the Kitchela Asad Lavai, for whatever rationale, the Kedusha that was imbued through Kibush was nullified, that Rambam says, through the Kibush of Nebuchadnezzar. The Kedusha that was re-imbued in Israel because of the Chazaka, we didn't conquer, we did it under the permit of the Persians, of Kuresh. They were the rulers. That remains. Nevertheless, really, chazaka is much weaker than kibush. Mida oiraisa, chazaka itself could not have imbued biblical kedusha. It could not have. It only added a rabbinic kedusha, and it was lechatchila made. First of all, either that. Then even bisman habayis it's derabanan, and others learned that even if bisman habayis it was midoiraisa, it was only connected to the Beis Hamikdash. And if there's no Beis Hamikdash, then the kedusha, that level of kedusha left, the truma doiraisa, and it's the rabbanan. The Rambam says befedish. The Rambam is das yachid by chala, which is unique in Parshas Shlach, where the Torah says bivoyachem el haaretz. So we have a rule that when is chala obligated biblically in Eretz Yisrael, bias kulchem, when we entered all together, which happened so far only once, which was under Yeshua. What happened during the second Beis Hamikdash, we didn't enter all at once. According to the Rambam, even though Tafshin Pevav now, we are living at a time that it could be, it already happened, or it's about to happen, that the majority of the Jews live in the Holy Land. According to the Rambam, since the way we made our ways back into the Holy Land now was trickle, a little bit, it wasn't a mass. The mass in gathering will happen at some point after the Beis Hamikdash will be built. Prior to that, it's the reality that we have. According to the Rambam, if you don't have bias kolchem, then you're not going to be chayiv truma doiraisa. According to the Rambam, even bisman bayesheni, according to the Rambam, even if the majority of the Jews now live in the Holy Land, it's still only midrabanan. Vadai, in other words, what we're saying is that truma itself is the rabbanan. So these are the two options. And this was a machlekes Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yechanan. So Rab Shimon ben Lakish, in the name of Bar Kapara, says, Amar, that why are you lenient? Because it's the rabbanan. Why is it the rabbanan? Evidently, it sounds like Reish Lakish holds truma itself is doiraisa. Truma in Eretz Yisrael, Reish Lakish is doiraisa. It's only a rabbanan v'hu sheyesh b'shni aroif. That's because the second box, in the case of the Mishnah, the box of Chulin, had 1.1 saw. If the box of Chulin only had one saw, then we wouldn't say it, because then it would be a suffix doiraisa. 50% it fell into one box, 50% in the other box. We wouldn't say leniently. We cannot allow to do that. Where the Mishnah gives a very lenient ruling.
They wrote the same.
In other words, if the soft truma, if it would have fallen into the box of Chulin, if there's only one saw in that box, for some reason now we don't know which one it fell into. We always say, how do you know count? You see, it was one saw before this. Forget about that detail. If something happened, you don't know. According to Reish Lakish, in B'Shem Bar Kapara, B'Shem Bar Kapara, then we would say that it's the mas meduma. You're not allowed to eat a non-kohen cannot eat the second box. Maybe the social truma fell into the chulin.
When the truma is more, is that
where the box of chulin has more than the truma, what's the suffix? Either it fell into the truma or it fell into the chulin. So what Bar Kapara is saying is, if let's 50-50, maybe Ataka fell into the chulin. So he says, since even if that would have happened, the problem is only midrabanan. That's why we get to say. Now, by the way, if we know it fell into the second box, make no mistakes, the second box is miduma. Midrabanan, it's meduma. I know that, but it's meduma because of a derabanan. Midoiraisa it would be permitted. That's why we get to say that it didn't even happen. Rabbi Yechanan Omar, afapi she'ein b'shni aroiv. Rabbi Yechanan says, even if both boxes, the two kupais, only had one saw, if the saw of truma fell into the chulin, it would have rendered it meduma midoiraisa. Still, we say, Sha'ani Oimer, it fell into the box of Truma. Why does Rabbi Yechanan say it? It must be because Rabbi Yechanan holds that Truma, Bisman Hazeh, however, is only Midrabanan. There's a problem with this. The problem with this is that it sounds like, in this question, whether is Truma, Bisman Hazeh, minimally Aviv, it would mean after the second temple was destroyed, don't forget, Reb Shimon ben Lakish, the Amiroim, after the Bayesheni, before the third temple is being rebuilt, during this time, midrabanan. Let's go with that. We know elsewhere that they don't say the same thing regarding this It's here, it's chapping that Reish Lakish is the one that's saying that Truma is Doiraisa. The only reason Sha'ani Yoimer is because the box of Chulin has Roiv. He needs the Roiv. Sounds like Reish Lakish holds that Truma Bizman Hazeh is Doiraisa. It's not true. Fragt die Gemara Machal Fashitosi Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. Where do we see that these two, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish and Rabbi Yechanan, take opposite positions? I see that Tamon. Now, on Daf Mem Aleph, and we spoke this out in the intro, just let me give it a case. Cases like this, listen to me, Yaviv, you have a fig of Truma that falls into, that was the case, 20 figs of Chulin. What's the din? You don't have 100 to 1. So what's the din? Everyone holds it's Meduma. Now, what happens if one of those 21 fall out? We don't know which one. So what I said in the intro, I just want to repeat it, is that if the issue to begin with is a biblical issue, even though one fell out, we still have to be machmer. That's the general rule. We don't get to say, maybe the one that fell in fell out. But if the issue to begin with is only midrabanan, that's the general way we deal with it. Even though it's taka asr midrabanan, but now that after it got mixed, another event happened, one fell out, we get to say, you know which one fell out? The problem one. Based on this premise, who holds what? So we learn, Taman hu oimer, that's feikon, batel, beroiv. Look inside the Marafulda, just to give the Oisius 5 lines from the top. That over there, where's over there in our pagination, Daf Mem Aleph, but in the 4th chapter, Pligi Rabbi Yechanan v'Reish Lakish, Hoy lefan of Esrim Te'enim, of Chulin, the Nafal Acha Shel Truma L'Toichan. So far you have Meduma. Then there was another event. Next step, V'achar kach, Nafal Echad Min HaTaroivis. One of them, 21, fell out. So Omer Reish Lakish, Sveikon batel beroiv, these were his words. What do these words mean? He's saying lenient. Kloimer, we say, Tolinan oisan shal truma naflamayem. That which one fell out? The one that fell in. We get to be lenient. And therefore, bottom line is, Reish Lakish says the remaining 20 are mutter. What is that based on? The rule is, what is that based on? That's based on Reish Lakish's approach to Truma, that Truma B'chlal is midrabanan. Because if, this is the rule, my friends, if you have an Isur Doiraisa that gets mixed, even though Midoiraisa it's batal b'rav, it doesn't matter. If the Isur to begin with is an Isur Doiraisa, wherever the halacha says, the rabbinic halacha says, it's not batal b'rav, so you got a problem. If one falls out, we don't get to say the one that fell in fell out. What's the chance? 1 in 21. It's a very small chance. If the Isur that fell in, lechatchila is only an Isur derabanan, only there is where we get to say that the one that fell in is the one that fell out. Fact that Reish Lakish was lenient is a raya that Reish Lakish holds, Truma Bizman Hazez derabanan. That's a contradiction for him saying over here in the name of Bar Kapara that the Chulin box has to have Roiv. Why? You don't even need Roiv. It's only the Rabbanon. How do you explain that? The Gemara gives a very simple answer.
Talking about when it was the rice.
No. The Gemara's answer is that what we learned in our Sugyan Daf Samaches is Mishum Bar Kapara. You're right. Reish Lakish himself holds that Truma Bizman Azez the Rabbanon. You're right. Reish Lakish is not the one that said our Mishnah speaking about a case where the box of Chulin had Roiv. He said it Mishum Bar Kapara. Come on, over there in Daf Mem Aleph, B'Shem Garmei. He's telling you his opinion. His opinion is that since Truma Bizman Azeh is the Rabbanon, even though mid Rabbanon it's not batal b'roiv, but now that one fell out, I get to say the one that fell in fell out because the problem to begin with is the Rabbanon. Over here, meaning on Daf Samaches in the 7th chapter, he is only saying Mishum Bar Kapara. Mishum Bar, since Bar Kapara holds Truma Bizman Hazeh, whenever that is Midoiraisa, so Bar Kapara needed to explain our Mishnah. Why do we get to be lenient by saying that Sha'ani Yomer, that the Truma fell into the Truma? Because even if it would have fallen into the Chulin Midoiraisa, you got no problem.
But why would Reish Lakish quote
Yes.
Bar Kapara and not his own opinion?
In other words, he just quoted Bar Kapara. He agrees with Rabbi. I'm giving something that's
But
very
it
superficial.
exploited one
Reish
another.
Lakish likes saying the opposite of Rabbi Yechanan. The only way he can argue with him is quoting Bar Kapara. I know that this is a very horrible answer, but maybe, who knows? I don't know. You know, that Reish Lakish's function was not to be a yes man, right? That was the whole story we have him, but that's why Rabbi Yechanan passed away. So even if he couldn't argue, he wanted to say, hold on, not so quick. Bar Kapara learns it different.
Questions on each one?
I think 24. Now, in the other way, Daf Samaches is not so problem. Okay. Why? Because let me say something. What did Rabbi Yechanan say over here? Rabbi Yechanan is of the opinion that the Isur is only midrabanan, right? That's what he's saying. The Isur of Truma B'zman Hazeh is only midrabanan. So that's why he's saying, no. Even if the box of Chulin doesn't have Roiv, I'm good. The rule is emes. What I'm saying is that if you have an Isur that's only an Isur derabanan, and if it falls into a mixture, we're speaking about, for whatever reason, it's not batal b'roiv. Midrabanan, it's not batal b'roiv. In the case of Truma, Truma needs bittul b'meya. So when it's not batal b'roiv, it's taka asr. But if one falls out, the logic should be that since the isur to begin with is an isur derabanan, we should be more lenient by saying that the one that fell in is the one that fell out. Rabbi Yechanan doesn't say that. Why wouldn't he say that? Why would he argue with Reish Lakish if he were to hold that Truma B'zman Hazeh is only midrabanan, which is what he holds over here? Because come on over there, Hu Oimer Kulhen Nasa Hoichiach. I know when we learned the Gemara, you quoted this expression in the Babli is Chazek Isura. What Rabbi Yechanan is saying is that you're right. Let's even go to the Rabbanan. One fig fell into 20. What does the halacha say? Since you don't have 100, all of them are asur. One falling out doesn't resolve it. Once something was established, was gepaskint, it's asur, how can you revert it? But still there's a problem. He's not being lenient. Here he is being lenient. How is he being lenient? Because the soft truma fell into one of the two boxes. Why are we being lenient? Why are we saying that it fell into the truma? Maybe it fell into the chulin. So since he says over there, kulam nasam hoicheyach, v'hachahu oimer hachen, and over here, he's being lenient only because truma b'zman hazeh l'Rabbi Yechanan is midrabanan. Why is he not lenient over there as well? So the Gemara answers, Shan yehi hache, here it's much different. Sheyesh loy bameh litlois. And there are different ways of learning it. First of all, one way of learning it is that it's a percent question. In the case of the 20 figs, Aviv, for the remaining 20 to be mutter, what are you saying? You're saying, even though one of the 21 is truma, you're saying that what happened was 1 in 21. That's a very small chance. What are we saying in our Mishnah? 50-50. In other words, the leniency over here is not the stretch that it's over there. Compounded with is chazek isura. Over here, there was no chazek isura. Over here, maybe an isur was created. Maybe it was never created. So whenever there's a question whether an isur happened or not, since it's midrabanan, we got to be lenient. Over there by the figs, even though the Truma B'zman Hazeh Rabbi Yechanan is midrabanan, one fig fell into the 20, the whole thing is an midrabanan. I know that. First of all, there's roif. Second of all, the whole thing is midrabanan. But now that this is what happened, midrabanan it's asur. Now that there is chazek isura, you want to undo it based on what? That something that 1 in 21 happened, he doesn't accept that. That's the difference.
So where would you draw the line? We don't know.
Two details. Let's go with both. Number one is it has to be a 50-50. Here at least the chances that something good, just, you know what the good is, Lenny? You have two boxes, Truma Chulin. Here's Truma. This fell into one of the two boxes. Good would mean the Truma fell into the Truma. Why is it good? Because nothing changed. I'm a chaya. The Truma, only Kohanim can eat it. The Chulin remains mutter to non-Kohanim. When do we get to say it, which is what we said, is because it was 50-50. Chulin was atkan chulin, so I say it continues. It's called the chazaka de meikara continues. Why? Maybe it changed, maybe it didn't. The rabbanan over there, it's different. Over there, you paskint. Number one, it's already asr. Compounded with, it's not that half fell out. Only one fell out. So for you to say the one that fell out was truma, it's a stretch. There are two components, and that's why is machman. Okay, now we're going to learn the brayso. We have enough time to. I know you think we're going to finish early. We're not going to finish early, but that's good that we have the time. Lenny, you came at the perfect. It's a new thing now. Our Mishnah never threw in tumentara. I know that we began today learning a brayso. In our brayso, it has nothing to do with this. I'm not going to talk it out, but you'll see it has nothing to do with this. The brayso has a huge chiddush. I'm borrowing the term palginan dibura. That if on top of the question, the truma fell into the truma or the truma fell into the chulin, if on top of that there is an issue of tumantara, as we'll see, which means that these three, the kupa achas, the other kupa, and the sa, if they were not uniform, which would mean all tahar or all tameh, now there's another issue. Maybe the tameh fell into the tahar. Now, I want to just chazer a couple of dinim and tumantara. Even if the tameh fell into the tahar, we are speaking about grain that never became mukhshar lakabel tuma yet, which means that as of now, even though we don't know which grain, which kernel is tameh, which kernel is tahar, the tahars are still tahar, just mixed. But what will happen at some point is that when you grind it into flour and then you add the water to make a dough, now that you added the water, now all of it became mukhshar lakabel tuma. And now the pile that has a mixture, some flour tahar, some flour tameh, if you have a kibetza amount of tameh and the tahar became wet, you have to have these two conditions, then oichel in the size of a kibetza can impart tuma. And it's going to be amazing that we paskin not the same. As far as truma and chulin is concerned, the brayso will also paskin that the truma fell into the truma. As far as the tumantara is concerned, we're going to say that the tameh fell into the tahar. Let's read it inside. The brayso has 4 cases. Every case is different. The last one is the most outrageous, but the easiest to explain. And we're going to come really back to the first and to the third. I'm just saying this right now. I'm not going to, because I don't want to talk it over 20 times. This one can even be the only one that we can speak about. This one will be the biggest chiddush vis-a-vis our Mishnah. Now look at this case. Shtei kupos, 2 boxes. Achas shel truma temeya and one of chulin tohayrin. So now we're adding this new layer of one of truma, one of chulin. Happens to be that the truma is tamei and the chulin is tahar. Now, the nafla, what's the third pile? Truma temeya. Aviv, before you read inside, what would happen if we would apply the law of the Mishnah to this case of the brayso? Truma temeya, box of chulin tohayrin, pile of sav truma temeya. What did our Mishnah say? What do we say? That the truma fell. If the truma fell into the truma, it's the same thing. Nothing changed. It's great. Why? Because the box anyways had truma temeya. The sauce truma temeya. No adverse effect. The other box that's chulin tohayrin remains chulin tohayrin. You would say the same thing. Say the same thing. We say half the same thing. And the other half contradicts the first half. The nafla saw truma temeya toich achas mehen. And again, the ein yodua le'ezenem nafla. So first of all, step number 1, ani oimer. This ani oimer is gavaldik letoich shel truma nafla, which means as far as did the truma fall into the truma? Did the truma fall into the chulin? No. The truma fell into the truma. How convenient. But we get to be convenient, but not 100%. Because what were to happen if the truma, temeya, the saw, fell into the chulin tohayrin? Let's say forget about the mas, forget about neduma. We're saying it's not neduma. It remains chulin. But let's just focus on the tuma. If there is saw's a lot more than a kabetza. If you have flour, if you have grain that's tamei, when you will make it into dough, the entire dough will become tamei. Now, who cares? Chulin, you're right. Chulin could become tamei, but when you will then separate challah, you're going to have challah that's tamei. We don't want challah to be tamei because challah is like truma. The kohen won't be able to eat it. He'll have to do with it with what we do today. We burn it. We don't want that. We want him to eat it. But there's a solution for that. What's the solution for that? That if you take the box of chulin and when you make them into loaves, prior to you mixing the water, you make them into such small loaves that you won't have a kibetza of tuma to be able to impart tuma. And then the details we learned above. And then when you separate challah, we get to say you have to separate a larger amount than the 1 and 24. You have to know the ratio. First of all, we say that it mixes uniform. So whatever the ratio is. So really, challah is 1 and 24. But let's say there's a percent there's 10% of flour that's tummy. There's one saw represents 10%. So instead of you separating 1 and 24, add 2.4 to the 1 and 24, add 10%, and say that the tamei in here is not, it remains chulin tamein. What is becoming challah? The flour that's tohoida, the chulin tohoida. And since the quantity is not of a kibetza, you're not going to have a problem. And by the way, a kohen can eat chulin tameim, so the kohen gets to eat the challah. The challah shaboy, the kedusha shaboy is tahar, and the tuma shaboy is chulin, so he's allowed to eat chulin tameim. We spoke. Now we also learned that if someone eats a kiprasu mechza of chulin tameim, midrabanan tumas gevia and a chanami, well, you take this into account. So he won't eat it before he goes into the Beis HaMikdash. I don't want to go into all of the details, but all of this was worked out above. But the chiddush of the Baraisa is she'ani oimer lo toich shel truma nafla, but v'hachulin ye'achlu nikudim. Nikudim means you have to make them into small loaves. Now you have to get the gavaldikeit of it. In other words, mimanavshach. Hello, if you're saying that the truma fell into the truma, you got no problem with the chulin. Halach is saying something happened. What happened? We're saying as far as the issue of chulin, truma fell into the truma. But as far as did maybe truma fall into tahara, yeah, maybe it happened. And you got to resolve it. And you have to take that possibility into account. Just this is amazing. Because this gives you an insight into how halacha works. Halacha is not telling you what happened. Absolutely. Halacha is not giving you, this is like quantum physics, like what happened? We're saying two opposite things happened. As far as the laws of Truma and Chulin, you know what happened? Truma fell into Truma. As far as the laws of Tara and Tuma, 50-50, we got to go on both sides. We have to take into account.
Yeah, a solution.
That's what I gave you the introduction. I gave it. So, but even that, it's a big chiddush. Case number two. Case number two is, there's 4 cases. Case number 2 won't pose a problem to our Mishnah. Case number 3 will. And the 4th case is just outrageous on itself, but that's a separate thing. Case 2, Nafla sa truma tohoida. So you have, guys, the box, Aviv, truma temeya, chulin tohoida. Truma temeya, chulin tohoida. The third, the saw, in the second case, the saw is truma tohoida. If Truma Tohira falls into Chulin Tohira, and what happens? Meduma, you ruin it. So what? That if the Truma Tohira fell into the other box of Tameh, it will become Tameh. Not now, but nothing you can do. So Ani Yomer, we still say L'toich Shel Truma Tameya Nafla. L'toich Truma. No, we say Truma fell into the Truma. The 2 boxes retain their same status, but now there's another detail. V'hachulin yeyachlu b'tahara. What does that mean? Look inside the Rashirilio, 5 lines from the top and the left, that you have to eat the chulin betaras truma. In other words, same concept of palginan dibura. Lamashal. You don't get to say the truma fell into the truma and end of the story. As far as truma and tara is concerned, the truma tohaira might have fallen into the chulin tohairin. What does that mean? That in here, what do you have? Truma. Now, we're not saying it's meduma. We're not saying that. But we are saying we are not allowed to be metame truma. We are allowed to be metame chulin. So we have to behave with the box of chulin on a heightened level where we will not be metame it. Because the Dilma, I'm reading in the Rash, nafla hakupa shel truma tohoida toy chulin tohoidin. And therefore, you can't be metame the box of chulin. And this is again the chiddush of the Braisa, that we don't say the truma fell into the truma and the end of the story. As far as the dinim of truma and tahara is concerned, we have to take into account the other possibility. Case number three. Two kupais. Here, one is truma tohoira, chevra halkop, and one is chulin temeyin. Now, case number three, the sa is truma tohoira. The nafla sa truma tohoira. L'toich achas mihen. The eini do le'ez mem nafla. So again, as far as did the truma fall into the truma or did it fall into the chulin? Truma fell into the truma. She'ani yoymin otei truma nafla. But regarding the dinim of tumantara, now here it's in the opposite direction. What's the opposite direction? Same idea. I'm not allowed to be metame truma. The sa, the third, is tohaira. If it fell into the chulin, and the chulin are tamei, forget about challah. Besides challah, what will happen when you add the water to make it into a dough? Now the tuma of the chulin in the size of a kibetza will be matama the truma. So you got to make small loaves, never to have a loaf in the size of a kibetza. Or the four options. Then he reminded us it's really for one of the four that we had in the Mishnah is to only never to put water. You're right. That's what the Braisa means. Fourth case, final case, Nafla saw Truma Temeya. So guys, the one box, see, it's the third and the fourth, like the first and the second are the same. One box is Truma Tohaira. The other box is Chulan Temeyim. What's the saw? The saw is Truma Temeya. So what do we say in our Mishnah, Aviv? The Truma fell into the Truma. By the way, if the Truma fell into the Truma, so what did that do? The box used to be Truma Tohaira. But now that Truma Temeya fell into the box, what happens now? Kohen cannot eat any of it. Forget about imparting Truma. A Kohen is not allowed to eat Truma Temeya. So what do you do with that box? You use it for fuel. But let me say it doesn't end there. We don't only say, well, the Truma fell into the Truma, right? So, which would be Gavaldik, right? The saw was Truma Temeya. The box was Truma. Oh, so first of all, it's Metama the Truma. But then on top of that, the Chulin Temeim, Danny, is Tomei anyway. What's Tomei anyway? Well, let me just read it. So no, we're saying that that maybe it fell into the Chulin vis-a-vis the laws of Tuma. And the Gemara explains that manafshach Truma nafla, then you can't eat it. Chulin nafla. Let me say this: the permit to eat the chulin is only that if the truma fell into the other box, there's no negative impact. Let me ask you the following question. I think that's what the Braisa is being mechadish. It's something crazy. I have a question on the Mishnah. Our Mishnah was Aviv, that you had one box of truma, one box of chulin. Forget about truma and tara, and you have a soft truma. What did the Mishnah say? I have a simple question. What happens if you have two boxes of chulin? Two boxes of chulin. Forget about truma and tara. Two boxes of chulin, and I have a soft truma. What do you say?
Don't go on with less.
No, we don't say that. We say that they are both meduma. It's very important. We don't say it fell into one. It could have fallen into either two. Why in our Mishnah are we saying that it fell into the Truma? Because we only get to say it if therefore nothing changed. The Truma was Truma anyway. If I have an option in which everything remains the way it was, then I say this is what happened. If a change happened regardless, I don't get to pick and choose to say where the change happened. If one of the two, it fell into one of the boxes, none of them had 100. I don't care which one had more or less. None of them had 100. One box is going to become Meduma. I don't get to say which one became Meduma. Both of them are Meduma. Same thing over here. Same thing over here. The one box is Truma Tohoira. It will be adversely affected if it fell into there. The other box was Chulin Tameim. Chulin Tameim is not Meduma. Chulin Tameim can be eaten. Whichever one it fell into, it's a negative. If it's a negative, you know what we say? We have to be choishish for both sides. That's the fourth case of the Brais. The problem is, and we're going to finish with this, on Daf Samachtes, Lama. Lama is on case 1, case 3, but just go to case 1. Like we spoke out, why do we say that the chulin has to be eaten nekudin? Why nekudin? Why don't we say the truma fell into the truma? If the truma fell into the truma, then the chulin is the way it was. I'm speaking about case number 1. The case number 1 is where the truma was tameya, the chulin is tahidin. So the soft truma tameya fell into the tameya into tameya. Answers the Gemara. The answer is that's just suffix tamei v'suffix meduma muter. That's the final component of today's daf. When do we get to say the leniency? Why do we say the convenient? Truma fell into the truma because if the truma would have fallen into the chulin, there would be no solution. The Chazal added that logic. Since there's no solution, we say what's more convenient. Over here, even if the truma fell into the chulin, truma tameya fell into chulin tohayrin, we have a solution vis-a-vis tumentaro. What's the solution? Make small loaves. I'm not talking about the chulin truma aspect. I'm talking about the tumentara aspect. Whenever there is a problem that might have happened for which we have a halachic solution, we don't discard that possibility. We only discard a possibility if it's a checkmate. So then we use the heted, we use certain logics, certain svaras to help us solve it. But if you don't have to find the heter, because you have, even if the worst case scenario happened, eat them nekudim, then we take that into account. To be continued.